My name is Emily Carter, and I used to believe in forever. I thought I had it all: a loving husband, a beautiful home, and a best friend who felt more like a sister. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt stable, safe, predictable. That was before I found out that the two people I trusted most were secretly sharing a bed behind my back. It started with small things, the kind that don't make sense until you look back and connect the dots. My husband, Daniel, began working late. Or at least that's what he said. My best friend Claire suddenly had meetings that ran late too. I didn't think much of it at first. I was busy running my small marketing firm, trying to build something of my own, while Daniel climbed the corporate ladder. We'd been married for 8 years, and I thought we had a solid partnership. Sure, the spark had dimmed a little, but that's normal after so long, right? At least that's what I kept telling myself. Then, one evening, I came home early from a client meeting. Daniel wasn't supposed to be home yet. His car wasn't in the driveway, but when I walked inside, something felt off. A faint smell of perfume, not mine, hung in the air. Sweet, floral, expensive. I brushed it off, thinking maybe I'd imagined it. But then I noticed the wine glasses. 2 of them. One still had lipstick on the rim. That night, when he got home, I asked casually, "Did someone come over today?" He hesitated, just for a second, before saying, "Yeah, Mark from accounting stopped by. We had to go over some numbers." "Mark wears lipstick now?" I asked. He blinked. "What?" "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "Just joking." But something inside me shifted. From that day, I started paying attention. He was more careful with his phone, always face down, notifications off. He started showering as soon as he got home, which he never used to do. And one night when he fell asleep, I heard his phone buzz. I picked it up and saw the name C on the screen. Just a single letter, no last name, no emoji. The message read, "I miss you already." My chest tightened. I wanted to wake him up, to scream, to demand an explanation, but I didn't. Instead, I put the phone down and pretended to sleep. The next morning, I smiled at him, made his coffee, kissed him goodbye like nothing had changed. Because I had a plan. See, I wasn't the kind of woman who wanted a screaming match. I didn't want tears or empty apologies. I wanted truth. Cold, undeniable truth. And I wanted it to hurt. For the next few weeks, I played my part perfectly. The loving wife, the clueless friend, the woman who had no idea her world was being quietly burned down behind her back. But behind the mask, I was busy. I hired a private investigator, someone discreet, someone who didn't ask questions. I gave him both their phone numbers, their schedules, and a simple instruction: find out everything. 2 weeks later, he handed me a folder. Photos, dozens of them. Daniel and Claire, in restaurants, in her car, even leaving a hotel. My hands shook as I flipped through them. Each image was like a knife, cutting deeper than the last. But I didn't cry. I couldn't. Something inside me had gone cold. The investigator looked at me cautiously. "Do you want me to keep digging?" I nodded. "Yes, I want to know everything. Every message, every place, every lie." And I did. He traced their messages, their calls, even found out they'd been seeing each other for nearly a year. A year! That was the same time Claire started helping me plan Daniel's birthday party. The same time she hugged me and said, "You two are perfect together." I felt sick. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the dark, staring at nothing. My life, my marriage, my friendships, all of it had been a performance. But then something strange happened. Instead of falling apart, I felt calm. Because now I knew, and knowing gave me power. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. No,
I wanted them to think I was still blind, still trusting. Let them dig their own graves while I built the perfect trap. So I played the part even better. I invited Claire over for dinner the next weekend. She came, smiling, bringing a bottle of wine like always. Daniel kissed me on the cheek, pretending everything was fine. I can see the guilt in their eyes, the subtle glances they thought I didn't notice. Over dinner I laughed, joked, asked Claire about her new guy. She blushed and said, "Oh, it's nothing serious." Daniel looked down, pretending to check his phone. That was the moment I knew. I had them both right where I wanted them. After she left, Daniel hugged me from behind and said, "You're amazing, you know that?" I smiled faintly. "Am I?" "Of course," he said. "I don't tell you enough." I turned, looked him in the eye, and said, "You should. People forget what they have until it's gone." He laughed softly, kissed me, and went to bed. And while he slept, I opened my laptop and started preparing for phase 2. I began transferring small amounts of money from our joint account to one in my name, only. Quietly, slowly, over time. I changed the passwords to the business accounts I managed. I backed up every document, every photo, every email. Then I started planting seeds, subtle ones. I mentioned to a few mutual friends that Daniel had been acting strange, that I worried about him. I asked Claire, innocently, "Do you think he's been seeing someone else?" The panic in her eyes told me everything. In public, I was still the perfect wife. In private, I was turning into something else, sharper, colder, focused. I didn't want to just leave him. I wanted him to feel what betrayal really meant. And by the time I was done, Daniel and Claire wouldn't even know what hit them. Because when trust dies, love doesn't disappear. It transforms, sometimes into pain, and sometimes into revenge. And mine was just getting started.
For a long time after I found the photos, I felt like I was watching my life unfold from the wrong seat. Like someone had handed me the script after the show had already started and expected me to improvise. But once I decided I wasn't going to improvise anymore, everything changed. Planning revenge wasn't about rage in the moment. It was about patience, timing, and making sure every move counted. The first thing I did, quietly and without drama, was secure my assets. Daniel and I shared accounts, a house, investments. We'd built a life together in spreadsheet cells and bank forms, and now those same papers were going to protect me. I moved small sums into an account that only I could access. I changed passwords. I called the bank and set up alerts so any large transfer would ping my phone immediately. I didn't take everything, no dramatic heist, no emotional scene. I wanted to hurt him in ways that would last. Financial instability, exposure, and reputation loss. Those things stick. Next, I focused on evidence. The photos the PI had given me were only the beginning. I needed undeniable proof of the affair. Dates, locations, text logs, receipts. The investigator dug deeper. He found hotel bookings made under false names, time-stamped photos from restaurants, receipts from late-night deliveries. He pulled message metadata that showed frequency and timing, not just the flirty lines they'd exchanged. I saved everything in multiple places: cloud storage, a thumb drive locked in my office safe, and a folder in my lawyer's office. I didn't want him to be able to claim the evidence was fabricated. While I did that, I fed my mask. At home, I was all softness. I made Daniel dinner on evenings when he stayed out late, laughed at his jokes, listened while he complained about work. I let Claire sit across from me and tell me about her weekend plans. I smiled when she hugged me, and I made sure my expression never betrayed the plans simmering beneath. People always underestimate those who appear calm. They equate calm with trust. That was the advantage I used. My next move was social. Daniel's career mattered to him. The office politics, the applause after a presentation, the respect. I started dropping hints to colleagues, subtly and carefully. "Have you noticed Daniel's timeline?" I'd ask a coworker at a charity event. "He's been distracted lately." I said it like worry, not accusation. People filled in the missing parts themselves. Rumors spread faster when you plant a seed and let gossip do the rest. At the same time, I made Claire slip. Not with threats or confrontations, but with tiny tests of loyalty. I invited her to help me with a client dinner, then accidentally left my phone where she could see a message pop up, one that was actually a screenshot I'd staged to look like it came from a male admirer. Her reaction was telling. The flush, the quick smile, the way she looked down as if guilty. That was the proof that she wasn't just in it for the physical thrill, she had an emotional investment. People who cheat emotionally are more dangerous because they justify themselves constantly. Claire's justifications would work against her. Then came the financial lever that felt the most intoxicating. Because I ran my own business, I had access to client lists and the authority to make some administrative requests. I used that carefully. I transferred a few clients to contractors, cited scheduling needs and a new strategy. No law was broken. I simply restructured what I controlled. Daniel's firm had a few overlapping clients and a major joint pitch coming up, clients who valued stability and a clean image. I dropped subtle hints to those clients that Daniel had been inconsistent, unreliable. I did it as a worried colleague, framing everything as concern for their interests. I was careful to stay within truth. I never lied outright, but the omission and tone were enough to plant doubt. I also used the one place a cheater assumes he's safe: private messages. Daniel had been careless with his accounts, logged in on multiple devices, used the same passwords, left calls unattended. The investigator captured backups of messages and photos. I compiled them into a clean, professional dossier. Times, dates, locations, and captions. No screaming, no edits that could be accused of manipulation. Literally, truth on paper. That dossier would be my hammer. But revenge isn't only practical. It's psychological. I wanted them to understand the cost of their choices. So I staged a scene that would humiliate them publicly, but look like a tragic mistake from the outside. Claire loved attention. She thrived on validation. She had recently posted a glossy photo with a caption about honesty in friendship. I reached out to some bloggers who covered our neighborhood scene, women who loved a scandal, but only when the facts were solid. I sent them a neutral note. I'm worried about a conflict of interest involving a local exec and an agency partner. Thought you should know. They asked for details. I sent them the dossier. The bloggers did what bloggers do best: dig, verify, and tease. Then I let the slow burn begin. A whisper here, a question there, a private message from an acquaintance at Daniel's office asking about an odd meeting, an anonymous tip to HR. Not enough to convict, but enough to make people look twice. Paranoia grows like mold in damp places. Once the suspicion starts, it expands on its own. In the middle of all that, Daniel said the thing every cheater says when the walls begin to close in. I don't know what's happening. Someone's trying to ruin me. He sounded scared.
Ed, a little too raw for someone whose life had been lived in lies? I met his fear with a soft voice. Who would want to ruin you? I asked, as if I didn't already know. He named competitors, old coworkers. He blamed stress, long hours, the grind. He was good at spinning stories, and for a while, people believed him. But secrecy always leaves tracks. One night, at a fundraising gala, I watched his colleagues exchange furtive looks. Someone I'd tipped earlier approached him casually to ask about an email she had received, an innocuous question, phrased like gossip. I saw Daniel's face pale as he realized the world he'd hidden his affair in was shrinking. That night, he came home and didn't speak. He sat at the kitchen table like a man whose life was becoming a set of falling dominoes. The most satisfying part of the plan was when I targeted the thing Daniel valued highest, his reputation as a reliable moral leader. I found a way to combine the dossier with a plausible whistleblower angle. Corporations loathe scandals, especially those involving personal misconduct that threatens client relationships. I sent a confidential package to the head of his firm. It wasn't an accusation shoved in a trash bag. It was a meticulous, factual presentation. Dates, receipts, backup files, and contact numbers for people who could corroborate. I signed it not with rage, but with concern for the firm's integrity. Within days, HR opened an inquiry. Daniel was put on a leave pending investigation. The firm sent him a terse email asking for an explanation. The once bustling calendar of meetings for his name dwindled to 0. He called me in a panic, voice shaking. "They're looking into me," he said. "This is insane." I kept my voice controlled. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. I didn't know. I wish I had known sooner." He begged, pleaded, offered to explain. I hung up and felt nothing but a cold, steady satisfaction. Claire was less protected than he was. The bloggers I'd nudged published a concerned neighbor piece about conflicts of interest between agencies and executives. The piece didn't name names, but the clues were enough. People talked. Claire's client started asking questions. One of her favorite event sponsors quietly moved their contract to another planner. Revenue slipped. In the small world we lived in, small slippages aggregate into ruin. But the crown jewel of my revenge required theater. Daniel loved community gatherings. He thrived on applause. He loved when people praised his family values. I planned to take that theater and turn it into a stage for truth. I found out about the fundraiser he chaired, an elegant evening supporting a kids' art program. Many of his colleagues, neighbors, and friends would be there. He would be honored. It fit perfectly. The night of the fundraiser, I dressed for a role, the grieving, composed wife. I arrived early and slipped the dossier, along with carefully chosen photographs, into the program packets. It was a small surgical move, enough to spread the facts among the very people who had once admired him. I also handed a copy to the journalist covering the event, disguised as a concerned donor. Everything had to look like coincidence, like the universe simply arranged for the truth to be seen. When the moment came and the MC rose to praise Daniel, I watched his face as people muttered, looked down at the program, then at each other. The applause sputtered and stopped. Someone whispered the first question. Someone else asked a louder one. Daniel's smile froze. His confident posture sagged. He tried to finish the speech, but the room had turned into a courtroom. Cameras flashed. Phones filmed. The dossier I'd planted circulated like wildfire. Claire was seated near the front. I watched her face.
Pale, hands clasped, the bravado gone. She looked like someone stripped of all pretenses, the kind of raw honesty people seldom get to see up close. I felt a pang, not of regret, but of something more complex, a recognition of the cost we were inflicting. Revenge hits more than the target. After the event, chaos spilled into the street. Reporters swarmed. Daniel's firm announced an internal probe. Claire's clients began canceling contracts. Social feeds lit up with screenshots and speculation. I stayed in the background, my expression unreadable. People came up to console me, to ask if I was okay. I nodded, murmured polite thanks. Inside, something had shifted. The plan was working, but the price was raw and immediate. Public humiliation, the collapse of careers, the gossips who delight in watching people fall. That night, Daniel sent a string of messages, pleading, angry, shameless attempts to pin blame on me for ruining everything. He threatened legal action. He accused me of fabrication. He called me names meant to wound. I read each message with the same practiced calm. Then I printed them and added them to the dossier. I had won battles that night, but war has a way of echoing. Claire reached out the next morning, voice breaking, asking to meet. I told her I'd talk when I was ready. My friends, some of whom I'd nudged, began to distance themselves. A few congratulated me privately. Others whispered that I'd been cruel. There are always those who see revenge as villainy rather than a response to betrayal. In the quiet that followed, I sat alone and cataloged what I'd done. I wasn't blind to the consequences. People would lose jobs, reputations.
Maybe their ability to work in this town again. Those sledgehammer blows would ripple outward into families, bills, and sleepy mornings. I had set a cataclysm into motion. And then a new piece of information landed in my inbox. Unexpected, and like a pebble into still water, it made a splash. An anonymous tipster had sent me a bank statement, a pattern of transfers from Daniel to an account in another state. Not just casual payments, but large ones at odd intervals. Alongside it, there was a photo dated 3 months earlier. Claire at a lake house he'd always said he'd never bought. She'd posted a throwaway photo of a corner of the room. The metadata matched the dates on those transfers. The implications were clear and ugly. This wasn't just an affair of the heart. There might be deeper entanglements, gifts, hidden investments, a life built on secret funds. If true, uncovering that thread would complicate everything and widen the fallout. I felt a thrill, cold, surgical, and a warning at the same time. Revenge had to be precise. If I went further, there would be no easy return. People would lose more than pride. They might lose their homes, their livelihoods, their futures. But I'd come this far, and I wasn't done. I closed my laptop, breathed in, and prepared for the next phase, one that would pull on threads no one suspected and reveal the full tapestry of their deception. The game had escalated, and I knew there was no going back to the person I'd been before. I'd chosen a path. I would follow it to the end.
After the fundraiser, the room felt different. The air in my house felt different. What had begun as a slow burn now moved with momentum. People whispered. Phones lit up with screenshots. Daniel's firm put a hold on his projects. Claire's calendar thinned. I had expected friction and fallout, but the speed surprised me. Once a lie is exposed, it doesn't crawl, it falls. The anonymous bank statement arrived in the morning like a challenge. The transfers were clean and consistent. Daniel's company account moving chunks of money to a small private account in another state. Dates matched nights he said he'd be at the office. The amounts were large enough to be suspect, but small enough to be explained away as business expenses, if you didn't look closer. The metadata attached to the lake house photo matched those same dates. The dots connected. I called the investigator and told him to focus on the money. Follow the trail, I said. Every transfer, every shell company, every shadow. He replied that where money flows, people follow. That was the part of the job I trusted. Numbers don't lie. People do. It took time, a lot of time. The investigator traced one account to a management company that owned a string of vacation properties. That company had a manager, a nominal owner, and a layer of anonymous LLCs. But somewhere in the paper trail, a payment popped up. An insurance maintenance fee paid from Daniel's account to an operations company, which paid the management company. The lake house was more than a fling. It was a secret asset. When the investigator handed me the paperwork, I felt the familiar cold settle. This was bigger than a hotel room and a few stolen dinners. Hidden assets meant deliberate planning, secrecy, financial deception. It meant Claire and Daniel had built a parallel life, funded with money that belonged, in part, to our shared life. I took the documents to my lawyer. Her name was Marisol. Sharp, methodical, the kind of person who read the fine print like scripture. She spread the papers across her desk and didn't speak for a long moment. "You didn't take this lightly," she said finally. "If you can prove funds from joint accounts or misappropriation, there are civil avenues. Divorce courts can be ruthless about hidden assets, but you need proof that the transfers were improper, not just payments." "I want everything," I said. "Accounts, contracts, the link between his firm and these payments." She nodded. "We'll subpoena bank records. We'll ask for audits. If there's a trail from company funds to personal property, that's embezzlement. It's also excellent leverage." Leverage. That felt like the correct word.
It meant control. It meant the ability to negotiate not just an ending, but consequences. While the lawyer filed papers, I kept working the other angle, public pressure. Social media had already done a lot of the heavy lifting. Reporters called, neighbors speculated, clients whispered. I posted nothing. I didn't need to. The narrative had started without my voice, and it was doing exactly what I'd hoped, making people look closer. Daniel responded like someone backed into a corner. He hired a crisis PR firm, then a hotshot attorney who called me one afternoon with syrupy contrition. "We want to mitigate harm," he said. "We want this private." He offered quiet settlements, NDAs, promises to step down voluntarily from public roles. That was when I smiled for the first time in days. "How generous of him," I said into my phone, and then hung up. Offers flew back and forth like vultures, negotiating a carcass. Claire begged me through messages to meet. She wanted to apologize. She offered to pay back money if there were any expenses tied to her. I didn't return the messages. Words felt useless now. What mattered was proof and pressure. The subpoena process uncovered a thin seam of truth that widened into a chasm. The company's internal records showed expense reports signed by Daniel for client hospitality and project amenities. The receipts he submitted matched invoices from the management company tied to the lake house. He charged company dinners and team retreats that were in reality payments used to maintain the lake house where Claire and he spent weekends. It wasn't just immoral, it was fraud. When Marisol walked into court with the audit and the invoices, the judge read through them, eyebrows narrowing. He said, "This will need a formal hearing, but preliminary findings here are troubling." Daniel's face when the judge said that looked like someone who had been given the notice of eviction from a life he'd built on lies. Word leaked fast. The firm placed him on unpaid suspension pending the hearing. The board issued a statement about ethical standards and an independent review. The press began reporting details of alleged misappropriation. Clients asked for audits. One major client dropped the firm entirely. The professional fallout was immediate. On the personal front, Daniel's bravado collapsed. He started showing up at our house, or at my office, or at events where he thought I might be. He'd stand outside for a moment, like an animal, deciding whether to come in or not. Once he left a note under my door that said simply, "Emily, we can fix this. I'll pay back whatever is necessary. Please don't destroy us." I dumped it in the shredder and felt nothing as it disappeared. Claire's life paled alongside Daniel's burn. Her event planner contracts dwindled as clients pulled away, citing uncertainty. Her friends stopped answering texts. She started calling late at night with a voice that was raw and unfamiliar. Once she showed up at my doorstep, mascara streaked, and begged me to take her in, to talk, to make it stop. I opened the door, looked at her, and then closed it quietly. She was an accomplice to her own ruin. When the hearing started, I did not enjoy the spectacle. I'd orchestrated the exposure, then watched the pieces fall like dominoes. Seeing their faces in the gallery had an unanticipated edge to it, not triumph, but something colder, a fatigue that came from being human and seeing human cost. The judge asked questions about intent and misuse. Daniel's attorneys argued that expenses had been miscategorized, but not stolen. They claimed the transfers were for client entertainment and were within a discretionary budget. My legal team countered with emails and calendar entries aligning retreats with nights Claire and Daniel had been photographed at the lake house. The photos became more than salacious proof. They were documentation of date and time linked to payments. The courtroom murmured when the evidence was laid out neatly, methodically, like a blueprint. After hours of testimony, the court ordered a forensic financial audit of the firm and demanded restitution hearings. The judge cautioned both parties about civil procedures and reserved judgment on criminal referrals. But the message was clear. The legal system had opened a door that could not be closed easily. Outside the courthouse, cameras pushed closer than I expected. Daniel's lawyer made a statement denying criminal intent, claiming misunderstanding and private failings. Claire sobbed into a handkerchief. A TV van blared the same headline that had been written across social feeds since the fundraiser. Cheating scandal rocks local firm. Reporters shouted questions, and my phone buzzed with a dozen missed calls from friends and acquaintances who wanted to know if I was okay. I answered none of them. That night, the gravity hit me in a private way. Revenge had been a strategy, a series of calculated moves. But watching two people I had once loved and trusted fall apart felt different in person than on paper. I sat on my kitchen floor, the dossier open on my lap, and felt the weight of what I'd set into motion. The ledger had balanced, but not in a way I expected. Lives had debts beyond money. Shame, loss, the slow erosion of possibility. There was also the predictable backlash. Some people whispered that I'd humiliated them unnecessarily, that I'd weaponized a private matter, that revenge was petty. Those voices were part of the price. I knew that. I had considered it. And still, sitting there in the dark, a quieter question rose in me. When did justice become vengeance? When did the line blur? Before I could spiral into self-judgment, new evidence surfaced. Someone in Daniel's firm misfiled an email thread, something small and human, and it revealed a pattern of transfers beyond the lake house. There were payments labeled partner benefit and consultant retainer that linked to a shell company. The shell company's beneficial owner was hidden behind a nominee director. But in the back channels of the corporate filings, a name repeated, an investor group that had recently donated generously to a charity Daniel often promoted. And that charity? It had a board member who happened to be a close friend of Claire's who had, coincidentally, attended the lake house parties. This spider web was messy. It meant more potential exposure. It meant more people would get hurt. It also meant the scope of the deception might extend beyond personal betrayal into a network of financial manipulation and favoritism. I had to decide how far I was going to go. The specters in my head were practical: pursue everything legally and expose the full
Corruption, or take a narrower path to secure what I needed and walk away with my dignity intact. The longer the probe continued, the more collateral damage it would cause. Families, employees, charities, people who weren't part of the affair could be swept into the fallout. Late that night, I called Marisol. "How deep can we go?" I asked. "If we push for a full criminal referral, what happens?" "There's a protocol," she said. "We can refer criminal behavior, embezzlement, fraud, to prosecutors. They'll open their own investigation. It becomes public. It becomes slow and brutal. Civil suits can resolve more quickly for restitution. Criminal pursuit risks turning this into a headline that eats everything." So there it was. A choice that was no longer purely mine. Legal strategy or moral calculus. I thought of Claire's tear-streaked face at the courthouse, of Daniel's note under my door, of my own sleepless nights. I had wanted them to feel a consequence, to understand the cost of their betrayal, but I hadn't wanted to destroy everything indiscriminately. I wanted accountability. In the end, I chose both, in stages. I asked Marisol to push for restitution and damages in civil court, while preparing a measured criminal referral that focused on demonstrable financial wrongdoing tied directly to misuse of company funds. That way, the law could decide, with measured impartiality, and I could avoid the temptation to become an executioner with a megaphone. I wanted the truth to be revealed fairly, not just theatrically. As the weeks stretched into months, hearings were scheduled, audits completed, and new names surfaced on documents. Some people implicated were cleared, others were not. The firm itself took a hit, reorganizing leadership and instituting stricter oversight. Daniel's career in the firm, at least for now,
was over. Throughout it all, I kept a ledger for myself, not of money, but of consequences. I noted what I'd taken, a private account for my expenses, protection for business interests, custody planning for assets in divorce proceedings. I also noted what I'd lost. Privacy, the softness of a life I once thought was permanent, the ability to come home and find everything unchanged. Those were harder to measure. One evening after a particularly grueling deposition, I walked past the lake house on the way home. The lights were off. The dock sagged into the water like an empty mouth. For a second, I felt a small, bitter satisfaction seeing its emptiness. Then I felt something else, an ache that had nothing to do with triumph. It was the human cost of making justice a weapon. I kept going anyway. There were still hearings, still interviews, still quiet meetings where lawyers crossed T's and dotted I's. Some friends remained loyal, others drifted. New alliances formed with people who respected the rigor of truth. In private moments, I told myself that I had not started this to ruin for ruin's sake. I'd started to reclaim a life. But sometimes reclamation looks like demolition. The story was no longer only about cheating. It had become about accountability, about a system that allowed some people to exploit trust for profit and pleasure, about the way community and commerce can be corrupted by private loyalties. I had opened a window in that world, and daylight streamed in, revealing dust and hidden things. And as the legal machinery ground forward, I braced for what would come next. The harder path was ahead. The settlements, the trials, the rebuild. But for the first time since the photos, I felt a new kind of steadiness. I had decided the limits of my revenge. I had chosen the tools of the law over the tools of humiliation. That choice would define the woman I would become when the dust settled.
The day the official hearings began, the sky felt heavy, gray and stretched thin as if it mirrored everything that had been building between us. The courthouse smelled like paper, coffee, and anxiety, the scent of lives being measured and judged. I walked in wearing a dark suit and calm I didn't feel. Daniel was already seated with his lawyers. Claire sat behind him, pale and small, like she had shrunk in her chair. She tried to meet my eyes, but I didn't give her that mercy. The first few hours were tedious. Records, timestamps, accountants explaining ledgers. But when my lawyer, Marisol, stood up and began presenting our evidence, the tone shifted. Every transaction, every hotel receipt, every false invoice appeared on the screen. The story that had once lived in whispers and screenshots now had structure. It wasn't gossip anymore. It was law. Daniel's attorney tried to paint it all as misunderstandings, human error, clerical mistakes. But when confronted with copies of receipts showing client retreats during weekends Daniel spent at the lake house with Claire, their arguments fell apart. There's no mistake in a photo's timestamp. There's no clerical error in a room registered under an alias. When they called me to testify, I spoke carefully. I didn't raise my voice or let emotion leak into my words. I believed we were partners in life and in business, I said. I learned that we were not. What was stolen wasn't just money. It was time, trust, and the future I built my life around. The room was silent. Even the judge looked like he had forgotten to breathe for a moment. By the second day, the tone had changed completely. The firm that once defended Daniel started distancing itself from him publicly. The board sent representatives to testify that they had been unaware of the misuse of funds and promised internal reform. It was the corporate equivalent of throwing him under the bus. Daniel sat still, his jaw tight, while his career disintegrated in real time. Claire was next to face questioning. Her lawyer tried to shield her, claiming she was an unwitting participant.
But the trail told another story. There were payments she had accepted for consulting tied directly to company accounts. There were invoices in her handwriting. There were deposits that matched withdrawals from Daniel's business cards. When confronted with those, her voice broke. He told me it was temporary. He said he'd fix it before anyone found out. The judge's expression didn't change. Lies, even desperate ones, don't carry far in rooms like that. After days of testimony, motions, and legal wrangling, the judge finally announced the decision: restitution to my business and damages for fraud. The court ordered Daniel to repay the misappropriated funds and imposed financial penalties. The company announced a formal termination. The district attorney's office would decide separately whether to pursue criminal charges. It was everything I'd fought for, victory written in legal ink. But when the gavel fell, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt emptied out. The room was full of people, yet it was the loneliest silence I'd ever heard. Daniel looked over at me then, the first time in months that he dared. His expression wasn't anger anymore. It was disbelief, like he had only just realized that I had truly, completely destroyed his world. After court, reporters waited outside like vultures, microphones thrust forward, flashes of light, voices shouting for statements. "Emily, do you feel justice was served?" one asked. I didn't stop walking. Justice? That word felt too clean for what had happened. Justice didn't come with collateral damage like this. At home, my phone was full of messages. Congratulations, sympathy, curiosity. Friends wanted to celebrate. My parents called to say they were proud of me, but pride didn't fit what I felt. I poured a drink, sat at the kitchen table where Daniel had once made breakfast, and stared at the empty chair across from me. Revenge gives you control, but it doesn't give you peace. Over the next few weeks, the aftermath began to take shape. Daniel moved out of town. His firm replaced him. His reputation, once spotless, was now a warning story. Claire's company closed. Her social media disappeared. She sent one last email. Long, apologetic, messy. She said she had lost everything and didn't expect forgiveness, but she wanted me to know she understood now what she'd done. I never replied. There are apologies that arrive too late to matter. I thought the story would end there, but it didn't. Marisol called one afternoon with a voice that made my stomach knot. The auditors found more, she said.
There's another account offshore. It was like hearing a ghost speak my name. What kind of account, I asked. Hidden assets, she said. Funds that Daniel transferred months before the affair went public. We're talking about serious money, hundreds of thousands. Some tied to his company, some from your joint accounts. He tried to hide it before the investigation began. The irony almost made me laugh. Even as his world was collapsing, he'd been preparing an escape hatch. But the law had caught up before he could use it. Can we get it back, I asked. Yes, she said, but it'll take time. You'll need to file claims through international channels. And it will expose more people. Some transactions link to others in his network. It's a web, Emily. Pull too hard and more will fall. That night, I sat awake thinking about that. The easy answer was to go after every dollar, to strip him bare until there was nothing left. But the harder truth was that it would drag more people into the storm. Colleagues, partners, families. People who didn't cheat, who didn't lie, but who had stood too close to the wrong man. The next morning, I told Marisol to proceed carefully. Recover what's legally mine, I said, but no public spectacle. I've had enough of those. She agreed. We filed quietly. The case went into the slow machinery of international finance law. While it churned, I started rebuilding my own life piece by piece. I renovated the office. I rebranded the company. I took new clients. I started sleeping again. But healing isn't linear. Some days I woke up strong. Others I found myself scrolling through old messages just to remind myself that those versions of us had once been real. Betrayal has a strange kind of echo. It repeats when the world goes quiet. Months passed. The legal process moved like molasses, but it moved. One day, Marisol called again. We did it, she said. The funds have been seized.
You'll receive restitution through the settlement channel. It was over. Officially. The last thread of the life we'd shared had been cut. I transferred the funds into an account with a name I'd chosen deliberately. Renewal Holdings. Not revenge, renewal. That evening, I drove out to the lake house one last time. The property had gone up for auction. A real estate sign leaned crooked in the front yard. The windows were dark. The water was calm. I stood on the dock where Daniel and Claire had built their secret world and watched the reflection of the sky ripple across the surface. For a long time, I said nothing. Then I whispered, "You can keep your ghosts." I threw the house keys into the lake. They hit the water with a soft plunk and vanished. Driving home, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. The hate that had driven me had burned itself out, leaving behind something quieter. Not forgiveness, not yet, but freedom. In the months that followed, I didn't date. I didn't rush into another relationship. I focused on my work, my friends, myself. I learned that peace isn't loud. It's the absence of panic. It's drinking coffee in silence without waiting for a lie to fall apart. But sometimes, at night, I'd catch myself thinking of Daniel. Not the man who cheated, but the man I thought I'd married. The laughter, the dreams, the small rituals of a shared life. It's strange how grief can coexist with satisfaction. I didn't miss him. I missed the version of me who still believed in him. A year later, the lake house was sold. The news ran one final piece about the scandal. Short, factual, almost clinical. Former executive settles fraud case. Ex-wife donates portion to charity. That last part was true. I donated part of the restitution to the same Children's Art Foundation Daniel had once used as a PR tool. It felt right to take something built on lies and turn it into something that could create beauty. One afternoon, as I was leaving the office, I saw Claire across the street. She looked different, older, thinner, fragile. Our eyes met. For a moment, I thought she might cross over, but she just nodded once, a small acknowledgement, then turned and disappeared into the crowd. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time in months. Revenge isn't victory, it's closure. And closure is just the end of a story you didn't choose, written in ink you can't erase. I closed the book and felt lighter. It had taken a year, but the balance was restored. The truth had been seen, the damage had been done, and for the first time, I wasn't the woman who had been betrayed or the woman who had avenged. I was someone new.
3 years had passed since the court case, but sometimes it still felt like the ink on those documents was fresh. My life had changed in ways I could never have imagined during those dark months. I had rebuilt the company from the ground up, opened a second office, and earned back the trust that had once been shattered by association with Daniel. Clients respected me not just as a businesswoman, but as someone who had faced ruin and come back stronger. Yet, even success felt quiet compared to what it used to. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by calm. My mornings began with coffee and a walk instead of crisis calls. I spent my weekends painting or hiking instead of checking legal updates. I had grown comfortable in the silence that once terrified me. Sometimes, though, I still wondered where Daniel was. I hadn't seen him or heard a word since the settlement. No letters, no emails, no attempts to apologize. His family had cut contact years ago. His LinkedIn disappeared. As far as I knew, he had vanished completely, like someone who'd stepped off the map. Part of me liked it that way, but another part of me, the one that used to need closure, still wondered if he ever thought about what he'd done. Then one morning, that question answered itself. I was at a coffee shop downtown, sitting by the window, scrolling through emails. The bell above the door chimed, and a man walked in. Tall, slightly hunched, wearing an old gray jacket and carrying a box of books. It took me a moment to recognize him, but when I did, my breath caught. Daniel. He looked older, not just by years, but by exhaustion. His hair was streaked with gray, his shoulders slumped,
his hands trembling slightly as he placed his order. He didn't notice me at first. He was thinner, quieter, stripped of that confident air he once wore like armor. I could have ignored him, pretended I hadn't seen him, but curiosity, or maybe closure, made me stay. When he finally turned around, our eyes met. For a split second, he froze. Then he walked toward me slowly, as if unsure whether he had the right. "Emily," he said softly, "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." I looked at him, not saying anything. Part of me wanted to leave, but something in his voice, the absence of ego, the presence of genuine regret, kept me there. He sat across from me, uninvited but not unwelcome. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The noise of the coffee shop faded into the background. "You look good," he said finally, almost awkwardly. "I am good. Better than I've been in a long time." He nodded. "I've followed your work, quietly. You rebuilt everything. I didn't think you'd ever want to see me, but I wanted to say, I'm sorry." The words hung between us like fragile glass, 3 years too late, but still heavy with meaning. "Sorry for what?" I asked quietly. "For cheating? For lying? For stealing? For destroying something we both built?" He looked down. "For all of it," he said. "There's no excuse. I thought I was clever. I thought I could control everything. The business, the affair, the narrative. I ruined everything that mattered because I didn't know how to be honest." I studied him carefully. This wasn't the Daniel I had known. The man in front of me wasn't powerful, charming, or dangerous. He was human, broken. "What happened to you after?" I asked. He gave a short, humorless laugh. What didn't happen? I lost the house, the job, the respect. No one would hire me for years. I worked under fake names, consulting on small projects. Claire left after 6 months, said she couldn't handle the fallout. I can't blame her. There was no anger in his tone, only resignation. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. "I just wanted to tell you that I think about it every day. About you. About how much I took for granted. You didn't deserve any of it." I leaned back in my chair, unsure how to respond. For years, I'd imagined this conversation. I thought I'd feel satisfaction, vindication, some kind of closure that would tie everything neatly together. But instead, I just felt tired. "You're right," I said, finally. "I didn't deserve it. But neither did you deserve the life we had. And now we both have to live with that." He nodded slowly. "Fair." We sat in silence for a long moment. Then I said something I hadn't planned. "I don't hate you anymore." He looked up, startled. "I did, for a long time. I wanted you to suffer. I wanted you to lose everything the way I did. But hate doesn't stay forever. It burns out, and all that's left is space. I filled mine with something better." His eyes glistened. "I'm glad," he whispered. He stood up then, picking up his box. "Take care, Emily." "You too," I said softly. And that was it. No dramatic ending, no final explosion. Just two people who had once shared a life, meeting one last time as strangers who understood each other too well. I watched him leave, disappearing into the morning crowd. This time, I didn't feel like chasing or running or crying. I just breathed. Later that night, I stood by my window, watching the city lights. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the exposure, the revenge, the silence. And I realized that I didn't need anything more from that story. It had run its course. I opened my journal,
the same one I had written in years ago, and added one last line beneath my final entry. Peace doesn't come from revenge. It comes from knowing the truth and choosing to stop letting it define you. I closed the journal for the last time. The next morning, I walked to the pier, the same one where I had once thrown the keys into the lake. This time, I didn't come to let go of something. I came to begin something new. The water shimmered under the sunlight, calm and endless. I smiled. Finally free. Finally me.